Now we're going to move on to our final panel of the afternoon, advice from experts in the field of banking and fraud regulation. The moderator for this panel is Jonathan Fielding from Protective Services, where he serves as the Regional Manager and Executive Office of Elder Affairs. Michelle Dwyer, President and CEO, Franklin First Federal Credit Union. Lucilia Prates, Statewide Director of the Massachusetts Senior Medicare Patrol SMP program, AgeSpan Inc., and Michael Timonet, Vice President, Secure Payments and FinTech at Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I hate microphones. I tend to stand up and yell and everybody can hear me. For those who don't know me, just 2 seconds on my background. I've been in protective services for about 30 years now, 22 at the state level and 8 years at the local level. For all 30 years, I've actually been working on financial exploitation of elders, mostly with the Massachusetts Bank Reporting Project. I actually am one of the ones who started the Bank Reporting Project in the 1990s and have been training banks, credit unions, financial planners. We were the first in the country to start bank training, credit union training, and working on elder financial exploitation. So it is something that we've been doing for quite a long time. What I want to do today is shift a little bit from our questions to panic the panelists a little bit. Not to duplicate what we've already talked about earlier today, but to lead off, I actually want to give you a little bit of a personal story. For 30 years, my philosophy has not changed. It's always been about prevention, protection, and early detection, which we've heard about a lot today. When COVID hit in early 2020, we went remote for the state, as did most people, and mail came one day, and I got a packet in the mail from the Department of Unemployment. And I opened the packet and I said, why am I getting a packet from the Department of Unemployment? Did my supervisor not tell me something? Did something happen? And sure enough, I was being offered unemployment services. And clearly, with 22 years in service, I was not being offered unemployment services. I did not know what was going on. And a quick search, I found out that my information had been compromised. It had actually been compromised several years prior as part of the Equifax data breach. I did not know that. It did not click for me, despite knowing about the Equifax data breach, despite preaching prevention, protection, and early detection, despite checking my credit reports, despite checking all my credit card statements, everything was fine. I didn't think that something might have happened with that data breach, that my information might have been breached. And it did get breached. My Social Security number was taken, and they used it to apply for unemployment benefits as part of the unemployment fraud. Fortunately, I got lucky. The scammers were not the brightest. And they sent it to my home address, and I picked up on it, put freezes on everything, and to this day, 4 years later, I still have freezes on everything. I'm not taking a chance. I unfreeze when I want to get a loan, I unfreeze when I want to get a credit card, I unfreeze when I need to, and then freeze it all up again. I take extra precautions. It's a pain in the neck, but I take the precautions I need to because I don't want to take that chance. They got my Social Security number. They got my information. So I want to tell you that despite taking all the steps that we think we need to related to prevention, protection, and early detection, things can still happen, okay? And what I want to do is I want to open it up to the panel. Initially, you're the boots on the ground, all right? You're the ones at financial institutions, or Lucilia, you're at, insurance. And from your perspective, from your professional perspective, can you identify kind of the importance of prevention, protection, and early detection. Why don't we start, Michelle, with you? You can take the mic.
So I just want to say that I have this same exact story for unemployment. That also happened to me. As I am the CEO of the credit union, I know that I did not let myself go. So that was very clear, but I've also responded the same way, putting all of the, the credit freezes on and responding the same way. But the protection and early detection is so incredibly huge in creating, in sort of my industry, creating relationships with our members so that we can kind of identify those early signs of behavior switches that may help us kind of catch some things happening prior to them actually becoming a real in-depth kind of scam. So those pieces are really large in understanding where people are in their lives and knowing how to track their finances and keeping track of patterns and all of that so that we can see some of those early patterns that might indicate that they might be part of a scam or a fraud or exploitation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lucia?
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for having the Massachusetts Senior Medicare Patrol Program here today. So from my perspective, I think it's all about prevention. And I think we heard that loudly and very clearly here today. It's about prevention, protection, and detecting. The Massachusetts Senior Medicare Patrol Program is a national program, and tagline is prevent, detect, and report. And report comes the third word, and there's a reason for that, because we have to do everything we can to educate people so that they can prevent, they can protect themselves, and then when it happens, then you leap to report. It's all about preventing, and I think collaborating. We all need to be working together. We heard that also very loudly and clearly here, if this is gonna really work.
Mike?
Yeah, thanks. I agree obviously with the panelists, but prevention is key. In my career, prior to being with the Fed, I worked for a large financial institution for 27 years, and I led fraud groups there, so I got to see a lot of different crime. And the reality is, getting money back is not easy, especially I worked for a multinational, and so funds would travel overseas, and it was really hard to get it back. If there was a chance within 24 hours, but beyond 24 hours, it was pretty much gone. And so it's much easier to stop a transaction on the front end and deal with the wrath of an upset customer maybe that he said, why didn't you send my money, right? Than it is for them to call up later and say, I'm out $10,000. When are you getting my money back? And you say, well, sorry, I can't help you. So for me, the whole process really goes to the beginning. If we do a better job up front, there's less work on the back end. And quite honestly, I'd rather deal with someone upset that we didn't send their money than someone that is a victim and is now out possibly life savings and that kind of thing.
Okay. One of the other things that we've heard a lot today is education, educating the public, and I've done hundreds of trainings over my 30 years, and so I'm big on education. I love teaching. I love providing information to whether it's new workers, workers that have been around, or the community. But one of the things that I want to, I guess, present to you or ask each of you is, for you in the community, working with your customers, working with those that come into your branches, or Lucia, those that you're working with on insurance issues, how do you educate so that they understand what you're talking about? How do you educate them at a level so that they understand not so much that this is a scam, because if they don't want to understand this is a scam, they're not going to understand it's a scam. But how do you present the information to them? How do you educate them? And then how do you differentiate between what is needed for education and what maybe is needed related to behavioral changes? Michelle, you want to?
Sure, yeah. From an educational perspective, I think it goes deeper than just the education for our members. As you were talking about training for bank staff, credit union staff, it kind of starts there and then trickles into that training being brought into educational aspects of just a general interaction, general transaction that you might have on a day-to-day basis with a member or customer. Having that kind of basis of understanding yourself allows you to kind of meet the person halfway in kind of trying to relay that information on a regular basis to your members or customers. In addition, having educational forums where we're able to kind of bring their community together, either age groups or families, so that we can have very, kind of casual conversation around these subjects, and people do open up in those situations. And when you have somebody that's willing to step up and say, yes, I've been through this, share an experience, then you'll see other people raise their hands or other people join in the conversation. And the more people that have those interactions and those conversations, those trickle out into the community. They become more comfortable talking to each other, bringing it up to another friend, oh, I heard this here, and that might trigger something in somebody else to say, you know what, I had a similar experience to that. And I think those aspects of having very, complete conversations with your members and your customers through either just one-on-one transactional things every day or by actually having educational events where they can come together as a community is huge as far as being able to kind of touch points everywhere in their lives.
Now, is this something that, I'm going to be a pain in the neck here, is this something that you recommend that you can go, or customers can go into their bank and ask for? That if you're struggling with, if you're not sure if something's a scam, if it's a problem, do you recommend customers going in and asking and talking to their banks?
100%, yeah. Like almost every institution I know of, and I'm sure you can speak to that as well, that we all have the training. We're all required to have that training. This is what we want to be doing. We want to be that touch point for everybody so that you have a place where you can feel comfortable coming in and just checking in and saying, hey, this is something that has come up. How does this sound? And we do have that. We have, we were able to form relationships with our members so that they feel comfortable coming in and mentioning something to us, or, in a general conversation, you might be able to pull out a little piece of information that says, ooh, there might be something here that isn't necessarily right. Let's dig a little bit further. I think it's a really good place to feel comfortable because you're already there talking about your finances, and so it may be an easier situation than kind of opening up to a family member or a friend that you feel might be a little bit more judgmental.
Lucilia, you deal a lot with Medicare fraud. How do you present that to consumers and help them understand what's going on?
Well, I think it's important to have a hook,
Okay.
right? So I like to start my presentations because I'm not educating people about their money, right? I'm educating people about preventing Medicare fraud, preventing healthcare errors, fraud, and abuse. How is that going to impact your pocket? So I try to make people understand that, there is $60 billion plus spent annually, billion with a B, annually on Medicare fraud. There's fraudulent waste of Medicare dollars that equate to $60 billion annually. That's a lot of money. So think about what we could be doing, or what the government could be doing with that kind of money to provide you with better services, better transportation, better whatever, So just think about that. Fantasize for a while, I ask people. And then I actually drive it home and say to them, you know what? Healthcare errors, fraud, and abuse cost billions of dollars, but they can cost you your life or the life of a loved one. And I'd like to close with a video that I think is quite powerful of how my father was a victim of a hospital-acquired infection, and then a hospital error, medical negligence, and he ended up dying 6 months from beginning to end. And that can happen to any one of us, and no one's immune. If that doesn't drive it home, And sometimes I think, oh, Lucelia, you're really nasty about that. Maybe that was too powerful for this group. But I think people need to understand that they need to be engaged. They need to be absolutely in charge to whatever level possible. They need to keep a personal health care journal, and we have lots of them at that desk, because there is an ARP volunteer there, Dennis, who is, I'm giving him a shout out, because he's doing double duty today, although you need half a shirt or something, I don't know. But that's about collaborating. So Dennis is here for AARP, and he was only too willing to also man the table and disseminate our materials. So we need to engage people. People need to keep a chronological account of what happens to them in the healthcare system. There are many rules around healthcare that most people are not aware of. You need to understand when you go into the hospital, you're being admitted with diagnosis A, but you might be leaving with diagnoses B, C, and D. And you need to really be, you need to be knowledgeable about that. Your family needs to be involved. We need to involve families much, much more. Our program, we educate consumers, beneficiaries, family members, caregivers, life partners, anyone who likes to get involved. You know, I always encourage people, get your families involved. They need to know what your healthcare issues are and how to help you navigate them. Because it's terrible to navigate the healthcare system if you're in good health. But if you're in crisis, you're really in trouble. And that's for any one of us, young or old, you know? And the older we get, the more troublesome it becomes. I know. Go ahead.
Mike, thoughts on education? And I know you were one of the ones that brought up kind of the behavioral changes they're key as well.
Yeah, so in my role, I don't deal directly with consumers, I deal with banks, right? The Federal Reserve, our customer base is banks. However, we've been looking at how we can do education to the consumer base as well. And last year, we actually got together and we hired an agency to help us develop a, you remember Got Milk, right, or whatever? Maybe it's Stop Fraud, right? We hadn't gotten there yet, but we were trying to figure it out. And we realized that it wasn't going to be that easy. We could put out educational materials, there's lots of them. ARP has some, I even grabbed one that, it's good information. But unless we get people to change their behavior, it's hard. So in the UK, what they did is they actually had what they called a Take 5 campaign. And basically it said, if something happens, take 5 minutes. Like, just try and break the trend. Don't jump on the phone right away, take a breath, that sort of thing. And so education is super important, but I do think it's more than just educating people. We got to get people to change. And I heard it several times, and my mother does this, so I will go there. If that phone rings, she's answering it. It doesn't matter who it is, right? And I'm like, Mom, you don't have to. It's got voice. I think it was Shelly Ann that said it, right? You don't have to do that. You can take the time, don't answer it. Mike at the beginning said, let it go to voicemail. Let it do all those kinds of things. Take that breath. So we got to change that behavior of jumping to a phone or or the kids, someone mentioned the kids too. They click on the links in the text or in email, and I've got 3 sons, so I'm like always telling them the same thing. Don't do that. So it all boils down to we got to change some of those behaviors that allows the professionals to take advantage of us. Because the other thing that you don't necessarily think about is these fraudsters are professionals. And they're not just like one guy necessarily doing it. They got syndicates. And they literally train people how to take advantage of you, right? And so it's one of us against a syndicate. And so that's where you got to think about it. But we got to change the behavior. And so what we do with the banks is we are trying to work with banks to develop consistent messaging that then they can provide to their customers. And actually, the big banks obviously do that themselves, but a lot of the smaller banks are very interested in trying to come up with a material that they can use. They can put their own brand on it, but it's sort of similar educational materials.
So taking kind of that lead and jumping around with our questions here a little bit, I'll stay with you, Mike. You said kind of taking a breath or taking 5. looking at it more from almost like a simple steps. What are some takeaways that we can all leave with today? What are some of those simple steps that we can all take away or walk away with to protect ourselves? You know, and again, it's not 100% protection. It's not 100% we're going to be safe all the time, but what are some simple steps that we can use to protect ourselves financially or better protect ourselves financially?
Yeah, and I don't think I'll be saying anything that wasn't said earlier. And so, you know, I picked this up from the desk over there, is how to prevent a scam or how to avoid a scam. And so I was talking to the folks at the table. And I said, oh, when I looked at this, a lot of things that were top of mind for me are in here. So I would recommend people look at that because, again, not all of it's not necessarily rocket science, right? But, you know, don't answer the phone is one. I mean, don't answer. I think we heard a couple times, hang up if you do answer it and you don't recognize the people, you don't have to talk to them. If someone tells you you won a lottery, you probably didn't. If you didn't, especially if you didn't buy a ticket, right? I mean, how many, you know, usually you have to do something to win it, right? And so if you get that call that, you know, you won it, but hey, you got to pay the taxes on it first or something, probably a good indicator that it's, you know, not right. And then we heard the whole discussion around, you got to do it right now. The sense of urgency that the fraudsters create, right? Either your grandchild's been in an accident, they've been arrested, or, you know, hey, your computer's got a virus and these bad guys are in there, or there's fraud on your bank account, we're going to help you with that. All those kinds of things are pressuring us to act quickly. And so again, that's the take the breath, and I think that's again something that we got to think about. And then probably one of the others, and it was mentioned again, if people are asking you to go get gift cards to pay or to do cryptocurrency or put the cash in a FedEx bag and mail it to this place, which, believe me, I've heard that it happens multiple times. In fact, friends of ours, the elderly father, he went to the bank, wanted to take out $5,000 for, he's a big fan of this actress on Yellowstone, apparently, and that she had reached out to him, right? Of course she reached out to him, and so she wanted some money, and so he went to the bank, and the bank actually said what he needed for her, or he was trying to send it out, and they said, no, we're not going to do it. Great on them, right? Except he went to a different branch and took out $5,000 in cash and then put it in a FedEx package, right? Because the fraudster said, oh, well, then just mail it to us. So things like that just don't sound right, that is another thing that I would say. So things out of the normal, again, and one other thing I would say, and it came up also, is talk to trusted people, family members, you know, maybe if you're assisted living and you got people you trust, you know, family, friends, children, that sort of thing, I think it's okay. And the last thing I would say, and this isn't really a message, but it's we got to destigmatize the victim mentality, right? We can't blame the victims, right? A lot of times I'm talking to folks and I'll hear, how could they be so dumb to do that? No, these are professional scammers and professional fraudsters taking advantage of us. And I have seen many smart people be victims to this. So again, it's, and I know ARP preaches this as well, is we can't be treating people as dumb. They're victims and they were taken advantage of. And the other guys are criminals, right? So,
Lucilia, what do you think? Simple steps to protect yourself from being, I'm not going to use the word victim, but from having somebody take advantage of you related to, insurance.
I think I already said that. It's really writing down what happens to you in the healthcare system chronologically. Looking at Medicare summary notices in your bills, like you look at a credit card bill, look at the medical bill. If something looks iffy, call your provider and ask, you know, what is this? I don't understand this. And if you're not satisfied with that answer, call the S&P program. We're there to help you. And we'll help navigate. We answer the phone. You don't have to leave any messages. And if you do, you'll get a call right back. And really just do your due diligence to really be aware of what's, you know, keep an account of the visit, you know, the PT, the physical therapy, the labs, the durable medical equipment that's been prescribed, and absolutely encourage people to look at their Medicare summary notices. One of the things that we're seeing right now is we've seen a lot of COVID tests. Medicare Medicare beneficiaries being sent out COVID tests after COVID tests after COVID tests. They were like on a revolving system. And to the tune of Medicare paying $96 per COVID test. And people are getting them regularly. And we've got lots of COVID tests that we sent over to the OIG for them to go after these durable medical equipment companies that were sending them out. What we're seeing now is intermittent urinary catheters, all right? $19,000 is a case that I'm handling right now that just came in this week that I happen to do the intake on because our intake person was busy doing another one. $19,000 worth of catheters. You know, so that's gone over to the OIG as well. So we're seeing a lot of that. We've seen the braces, and in fact, I think we've got some flyers out there on the braces. But, you know, you have to keep an account. You have to be vigilant. You have to look. And you talked about the cultural change. I've been doing this for 22 years. And there's been a real cultural change. People are getting upset, they're getting angry, they're looking at the Medicare summary notices and they're saying, enough, you know, who am I gonna call? Now, sometimes they don't know who we are. They do call the AG's office and they're sent our way because we're Medicare. So we've got great partners over there. And they go to the SHIP program, the SHINE program in Massachusetts, and they get sent our way as well. So we've been referring case after case to the Office of the Inspector General. We didn't refer a lot of fraud cases in the past, but ever since COVID came, and now hopefully gone, or almost gone, we have been seeing a lot of fraudulent activity.
So staying vigilant is critical.
Absolutely critical.
Michelle?
Engaged.
From a banking perspective, I agree with everything that Mike said for sure. We obviously are handcuffed a little bit by regulations and stuff like that, you know, we can only say no to a point. We can't prevent somebody from withdrawing their money, you know. We can refuse wires, we can refuse to cut checks, all that stuff, but if they want to come in and withdraw cash, they kind of have to do that. Some very specific banking things that you can do to protect your banking relationship and your accounts. Some institutions allow you to have a password on your account so that when you come in to do a transaction or you call to get information, they have a very specific password that you provided them that you have to give them in order to give you information. You can also have security questions set so that they will ask you those security questions. This avoids us asking for your social security number, your date of birth, those things that, you know, we want to avoid having to ask you because it's scammy. In addition, there is also a thing that you can do. Some institutions do this, some do not. There has to be paperwork put in place and all this stuff, but some allow you to have a trusted contact. So if you have somebody in your family that you really trust, you can say to your bank or your credit union, if you think something's up and I need to have intervention, please contact this person. And it gives us kind of end around to the privacy policies so that we can contact that person, your family member, your trusted friend, whoever you have named, to say, hey, this is what's happening. We think you might need to intervene here. And that might be something that squashes it from the beginning or helps prevent something from stopping if we can't convince that person that it might be a victim of a scam. Other things that I like to always tell people, social media is where everybody gets your information. Yeah. Those grandparent scams, those romance scams, when they're calling up, they're getting a lot of their information that they know from your social media. So just be very careful about what you share on your social media, especially if you're traveling. We've had people post about them going to Florida, and then we'll get a person call and being an imposter of that person saying, hey, I need you to, you know, change my debit card information because I'm traveling to this other place. And then now they have your debit card information. Thankfully, in our situations, they tried to imposter members that we know very well and have very specific voices, so we knew immediately. But those are things that happen. They get information that way. And another thing I always like to bring up is, because Cash Apps and Venmos and Zellos have come up a couple times here, is please go into your settings and make sure they're set to private or to friends only. Because if you're sending cash and they're not, I can just look up your name and I can see who you're sending money to. I can see why. That's all very public information if you don't have it set to friends only or private only. So those are all very important things to remember.
Thank you, I didn't know that.
Most people don't.
One of the things that has been raised several times, and there have been some suggestions and some thoughts that have been identified today, but it's been the topic of collaboration, and you're going to get my kind of preaching, so bear with me for a minute here. Collaboration is a key to dealing with these cases, and unfortunately, especially with Elder Protective Services, but when we're dealing with Elder Protective Services and we're dealing with banks, sometimes the walls go up, the silos go up, and everybody kind of clams up, claims privacy, confidentiality, nobody wants to talk to anybody else, and everybody gets frustrated. And there had been an improvement over the years, and then COVID happened and things kind of went downhill. It's nice to hear that, you know, you've had some success working with protective services, but in general, it's hit or miss, unfortunately, especially with protective services, working with banks, working with local councils on aging. And one of the things that I want to throw out there and then throw out to the panelists is, how do we really start the collaborations? And one of the things that I'm going to throw out and offer is the federal government actually, you heard Emily Shea suggest or indicate this morning, Money Smarts for Older Adults, which is through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is kind of training through or for older adults. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau offers a variety of training, and one of the things that they have offered that very few states have actually taken them up on is financial networks, which are glorified multidisciplinary teams, is really all that they are. And they are willing to pay and come to the states and help states set them up, however we decide we want to do them, whether it's on a county basis, whether it's on a city basis, whether it involves government, whether it involves, you know, local entities, protective services. I mean, there are a variety of ways that we can do it, but there has to be collaboration. There has to be a way to, and I'm not suggesting violating privacy and confidentiality. I'm not saying release account numbers or anything like that. I'm not, please don't misunderstand me. But at the same time, we're not going to resolve these cases. And so what I'm looking to you as panelists is, from your perspective, how do we deal, one, what are your thoughts on collaboration? And two, how do we deal with this issue?
So collaboration is my favorite thing. We do it quite often. We actually host a lunch and learn with our local senior centers along with the Northwestern District Attorney's Office. We engage that particular town, city's police department, the elder care services within that town. And we also try to get other institutions, financial institutions, to do that, whether they partner with us or we ask for permission to do it within their area. A lot of times they're game to partner with us, to participate, to have a speaker come in from a different perspective. I think it's huge in creating that network, as you're talking about, in different ways to share information without violating those privacy issues. Because certainly when you know that a member is a victim of a scam and going to another institution to kind of end around you, you wish you could do that, but you can't. But there are ways to kind of share information on a, you know, a level that is, hey, this is happening in our area, please be on the lookout for it. And that can help kind of squash some of that stuff that's happening within your community.
Yeah, and I'll jump in if it's all right. So one of the things, I'm also a big proponent of information sharing, and again, it doesn't have to be PII, so I totally get where you're coming from. I will say that several years ago, when I first joined the Fed, we were trying to do some work around this topic. What can we do to get the industry to try and share information? And I'm not just talking about financial institutions, but law enforcement, different, maybe it's consumer advocacy groups, that kind of thing. Whoever had the information, let's figure out how to share it for the good. And about 3 years ago, I pretty much got shot down, right? I mean, the banks were not in the mood to necessarily do that. There was a lot of reasons why, obstacles, privacy concerns, competitive advantage, Even when I worked in a bank, my goal was to move fraud away from my organization, but not to if it went to Michelle's, that's not my problem, right? That was Michelle's. I'm in a different position now. I look at it very differently now, in that we all should be trying to do it together. So it's super important from that perspective. I will say 3 years later, I'm now leading a cross-industry work group that's focused on how do we share information. We have banks, we have consumer advocates, we have fintech groups, we have a lot of different people at the table. And in fact, I was reviewing the document today. We are actually coming out with, hopefully in the next couple of months, a document that'll be recommending what we should be doing from an information sharing perspective as a nation or as an industry. So I'm a big proponent. I said 3 years ago the banks wouldn't talk to me about it. They're on my group now, right? And I'll tell you why. In those 3 years, what we've seen, and the one lady back there, that she's gone, but she was asking about, what do we do? We have now progressed to where payments are settling instantly, like milliseconds, right? And in fact, the Fed rolled out FedNow last year, but there's been programs out there for a long time, and we heard about Zelle, and we heard about some others. Because payments have accelerated so fast, the fraudsters and the scammers are starting to take advantage of the system, and banks are now worried about that and are saying, hey, I think we need to share some information to stop this. So I personally think we've kind of gotten over a crest, and hopefully we'll pick up a little bit of speed and start really, really doing this. Other countries are already doing this, by the way. So they mandate it that all the banks report the information, that information becomes available to law enforcement, et cetera. So now, their infrastructures are a little different. They might have 8 to 10 banks in their country. We have 10,000 banks in our country. So it's a little bit different to get everyone to share, but I'm optimistic that we're getting there. We're going to get there.
Lizette?
Well, collaboration. The S&P program is a collaboration among many community-based organizations across the state, grassroots, governmental, non-governmental. We have advisory committees as well as our statewide steering committee that is, again, it's a collaboration of organizations. And we always try to pull more people in, constantly, because we can't do this work alone. We don't do this work alone. We have volunteers. We collaborate with them. They collaborate with us on a regular monthly basis. And we look to collaborate with, hospitals, and we create task forces. One example of a collaboration that we recently put together was an ambulance billing task force. We all had a lot of ambulance billing issues going on across the state, a lot of surprise billing, and people didn't know how to decipher their bills. Or was I supposed to pay for this bill or not? Is my mother responsible? Is she not? Why is she being billed $1,700 to go across the parking lot? And if Medicare pays, it's only $200 or $300. So anyways, we put together a task force of collaborators, such as CMS, National Government Services, some of our volunteers. Janice was actually part of that task force as well. We had the president from the Massachusetts Ambulance Association and many others at the table, really trying to figure out collaboratively, how do we handle this? How do we educate consumers about what ambulance billing what should they know about ambulance billing? So the result was a brochure that I think is on that table if anybody would like it. But again, it's all working collaboratively. I don't have any of these answers myself. If we don't collaborate and come up with these answers, then what are we doing? We need to collaborate, absolutely.
So if I could add one thing too, I'll just put out there, the fraudsters are collaborating. You know, they are working together, they are sharing their secrets, they publish their secrets.
They do.
They
You
sell
know,
on numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's all out there. And so the challenge that we face there is that they don't have to deal with the same rules that we do. So when it comes to sharing information, we do have to be careful, and they don't have to do that. They can just do whatever they want. And so we are at a disadvantage from that, but they're making it work, and I know we can use it for the good and obviously make it work as well.
Thank you. And I know we are only going till 3, so I'm gonna, it's 2:54, so are there questions? Oh, Mike's coming from behind you.
Thank you. So I think the scariest thing I heard from this panel was, Jonathan, your story from the beginning, because the data
Sorry.
breach, well, the data breach stuff is not something we can prevent.
Correct.
That happens.
Correct.
So the questions, several questions. One is, from all the data breaches, what percentage, what kind of damage has that really resulted in? Has there been a lot of loss of money and data and so forth from those kinds of things? And then you have a plethora of all these identity platforms that were invited to pay a lot of money to protect your identity. Is that necessary? But it's a burgeoning industry because of this.
I can't speak for everybody that was part of the Equifax. Actually, and unfortunately, I've been part of 3 data breaches.
That you know of.
That I know of, yes. T-Mobile, my cell phone, and healthcare, my healthcare provider, my former healthcare provider. So in terms of Equifax, several other people at my place of employment were also part of it. Nobody was hurt, and there are a variety of ways that it can hurt you financially. You know, they can get money through unemployment, which can affect you. It can affect your pay. It can affect your taxes. It can affect your health insurance. So there are a variety of ways that can affect you, and it can affect months, if not years, to fix the problem. So for nobody in my office, it affected, kind of, and that's only because we can talk, but I do know from watching the news and from talking to others anecdotally, there are people that were dealing with it for years, either because they were having to deal with, I didn't collect unemployment, I'm having to pay it back, or they were having to pay it back from a tax perspective. So it did affect them. Now, to go back to your point that there was no way we could have predicted it, you're right. I couldn't have predicted that I was going to lose my information in a data breach. But what I didn't, there were 2 things. One is, we heard earlier that when there's a data breach, you're supposed to be notified if your information is breached. I don't recall being notified that my information was breached as part of Equifax. I probably was, and I probably ignored it. And so that's probably on me. If I discarded it, whether it was an email, whether it was information I was sent, then, if you're sent information that says like with T-Mobile, I was sent information that says you're part of a data breach, your information was released or whatever, then you should be following steps to ensure that that information is secure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if I didn't do that with Equifax, that was my fault. And then, several years later, they used the information. I think what we have to be careful of is that the other thing is, I think I probably assumed at the time, well, if something's released, if a year or 2 goes by, no big deal, they're not going to use it. These scammers will sit on your information for a very long time and then use it whenever they want to, like a social security number, whenever they want to. It'll get sold on the black market, and who knows when they're going to use it. And so that's what they did with my social security number. So you want to make sure that if you get something or you're notified that there's a data breach, you take it seriously.
But they often say, sign up for this service to protect your identity. And there's a lot of them, and some of them are very pricey. And it's not
LifeLock.
Yeah,
So-
Again, I'm not an expert on data breaches. You know, I'm not an attorney. I'm not sure you need to sign up for a service. You know, that's my professional opinion. But, you know, I took steps in terms of freezing all my accounts. I went to the bank. I filed a police report. I filed with the federal government. I knew what to do. I figured it out. You know, there are people that have been through this, that have done that before. You could talk to enough people that could walk you through those steps that you wouldn't have to pay for that service.
If I can add one thing on the data breaches. So interestingly enough, we only hear typically about the big ones, right? There are literally thousands per year, right? If you look at the stats, there's thousands. I am of the opinion that all of my data is out there. And I live like that, knowing that it's all out there, right? So I do use the service. There's actually one provided through my organization, and I have it for my children, and I do make sure that's there. I can't recommend to you because I'm not allowed as part of my role, but there are some good services out there. I will say the ones that are free tend to be, they're free. I don't know that I would necessarily recommend those. And then I do exactly what we heard earlier, is freeze your accounts, freeze your social security number, freeze them for your children, especially if you have grandchildren that don't even use a social security number until they're working or in high school or something.
Right.
Those are primed for fraudsters. They want to get their hands on those because they know no one will be watching them for 15 years, right? So it's a good idea if you got little children or grandchildren to lock them up as well, or get their parents to lock them up.
Or as simple as a password on your bank account.
Yeah.
You know, all I did was put a password on my bank account. So when I go in and I try to put money in, pull money out, they ask me for my password. It's real simple. Yeah. You know, it may seem like a headache, but it secures my account, and nobody can do it except for me related to my password. And it's something that I know, and I can change as I feel I need to. And it's something that I did immediately. And the state government offers security in terms of, you know, people you notify, et cetera. So there were various steps that we took that secured everything. So again, I don't know that it was necessarily 100% secure, but it made me feel a whole lot better once it was done.
We just need to take this message beyond here, beyond this space, to others. Because I'm thinking, as we're all talking about, you know, how to protect ourselves, and we sort of know how to navigate, I'm thinking about those that are vulnerable out there, those who don't speak English, who have limited English proficiency, those who have cognition issues, disability issues. You know, those individuals are sitting ducks for this as well. We all are, right? It's just a matter of time, I think, for me. I keep knocking on wood and saying, you know, please. But it's going to come someday. So I'm waiting for it, right? But I feel for those who cannot navigate, who don't know who to call. And so we just need to, you know, reach out to those individuals and to pass the word of what we've learned here today to others. I'd like to leave us with that.
There was a question.
Yep,
How good is to freeze your credit? How effective?
You can go to the credit bureaus, Equifax, and the different agencies out there, the credit reporting bureaus, and go on their website, and you can do it right on their website.
Yeah, and you can freeze right on their websites, yes.
Yeah.
And I know when my son decided he wanted to get a car and needed a cosigner, which don't do, but I couldn't get it without a cosigner. I couldn't obviously co-sign because I was frozen. So I went and said, okay, to the car dealer, which credit bureau do you run your checks through? They said, this is the one we run it through. I said, okay, you're gonna run it on this one. I'll unfreeze this one. I unfroze it, they ran it through that one, and then I froze it again so they could run it strictly for that car check or that credit check on the car loan. So again, it was arranged with them. They were more than willing to do that to run the check. So again, it's a few extra steps you have to take, but we work through it.
Oh, yeah, it's free.
It's
and-
free.
Yeah, it's
It's
free
free.
through one of the credit bureaus.
It's free.
Hi. Hi, it's Jonathan. Thank you for that plug on collaborating with banks and protective services. Obviously, being a protective service worker, that is really, really needed. I do have a question, though. Not sure if you guys are able to answer it. One things we do see on some of our financial cases, an elder will go to a specific bank. The teller will do a really great job at not allowing them to do X, Y, and Z, even taking out money. But then they'll go to like the same exact bank, maybe the same town, and that teller will give in. And so what are we doing to make sure that all of them can sort of do that same thing? Or was that first teller doing the wrong thing and not by saying no? Obviously, I'm pumped about that first teller saying no and not very happy at the second one. But why is there a difference in that? Why does that happen?
I think that's just a training perspective. Each branch has different branch managers or different leadership. It should be across the board, and there typically is an internet kind of situation where you could put a note on somebody's account when they come in. It's just a matter of how fast that transaction transpires from one branch to the other and whether or not that's, translated. But yeah, it's a communication issue. It's really an internal communication issue that needs to be corrected.
And it can vary across institutions too, right? Based on their own policies. So there's no standard, I guess is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Hi, Jonathan, this is a question for you on freezing your accounts. My wife and I have joint accounts. Do we each have to freeze in our own? So she has to open up an online a system of the three, because I have mine, but she doesn't.
For a joint banking account?
Yeah.
That would be a bank question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yes, because credit is connected to your social security number. So yes, you would need to file
So
them
Equifax
separately.
only has an individual.
Yes.
Correct.
So she would
Correct.
have to do hers too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you don't have to do it online. You can call them. So if
Yeah.
you want to avoid the online,
She's not happy about going online. putting
yeah, so
more
you can
passwords.
call Equifax.
And how do they know? How do they know who you are?
They'll go through
That has to
some
be a social
process.
security
yeah.
number, right?
They'll go through some kind of validation process.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.